It really is only being covered when the outlets in the U.S. media feel they have an obligation to cover something. So, for example, this is the first day of the trial. That's something important. This is the first day of Bradley Manning's defense. That feels like something important. Other than that, we aren't going to see a lot of outlets. We've seen a small, dedicated core group of individuals, which I've been a part, an independent journalist named Alexa O'Brien, courthouse news reporter who works in New York City named Adam Klasfeld. We've had a courtroom sketch artist named Clark Stokely, who also happens to be the driver of the WikiLeaks truck, which I have to tell you, it is quite remarkable and phenomenal to watch that drive onto the base every single day. And then we have Nathan Fuller, who is a reporter for the Bradley Manning Support Network. And these are the people who have been showing up every single day, and many of us don't even live in D.C. It baffles me that in a city of Washington, D.C., where I assume there are thousands of journalists, there aren't more reporters who feel like they should be here regularly. But we've had Associated Press here regularly. They've been doing good work as an establishment news organization. Occasionally, we see the Washington Post, the Guardian, the New York Times shows up from time to time because they were shamed by their public editor, Margaret Sullivan. We just don't have the sort of wall-to-wall coverage that the George Zimmerman trial has or some of these other more sensational trials.
Kevin Gosseler, could you explain what the significance is of the way in which WikiLeaks is being characterized in the trial? That is, that Manning leaked these documents to the website WikiLeaks and not to a mainstream media outlet like the New York Times.
There's an Army intelligence report that Manning is accused of leaking from the Army Counterintelligence Center. It suggested that WikiLeaks might pose a threat to the U.S. military. That wasn't a question that was answered by the report. They weren't able to find fact that the enemy, in fact, would use WikiLeaks to go find U.S. government information. But in that report, it describes WikiLeaks as an organization that is intent on basically stealing proprietary data of the United States government or even corporations, and doing this because they feel they have a commitment or desire to expose wrongdoing of governments. So they see Manning as working on behalf of this organization. And today, after we're done with this interview, Professor Yochai Benkler is going to take the stand for the defense. And he is being put on the stand to talk about what is WikiLeaks. It's very important in this case that the defense gets out that WikiLeaks is a media organization, that when Bradley Manning engaged in his act, which I consider classic whistleblowing, based on his statement on February 28th, that WikiLeaks is in fact a media organization and not some sort of organization that would have been possibly working and doing so for the benefit of foreign intelligence services or adversaries like terrorist organizations.
Well, I mean, the fact is that WikiLeaks collaborated with the New York Times, the Guardian of Britain, the El País of Spain, Der Spiegel in Germany, and many other very mainstream news organizations in releasing these documents. Now, Kevin, just that picture you described of the court artist is the one driving the WikiLeaks truck?
That's correct. In fact, there's a story. He was stopped on base in the visitors' parking lot on Monday. And in fact, a police officer approached him and said, "We have a report that you're disseminating top secret information on Fort Meade base." And they went over his car and they even asked to search it. But he said you'd have to get a warrant to do that. He's a very fun individual to have in the press pool with us, Clark Stokely. And he's done some very amazing sketches. You can see them in every single post that I do on the court-martial.
Kevin Gosseler, what's the significance of this being a court-martial, that is a military trial, rather than a trial in a civilian court? How is that being played out, both for the prosecution and in particular, of course, for the defense?
I think that the difference is getting blurred because we have the national security state really taking over a lot of the legal processes in the United States. But what I fundamentally see is that Coombs has an uphill battle as Manning's defense lawyer, and that he is arguing against the government, which is making a case to a judge that is basically appointed by the government to oversee this case. So there's a culture to this whole process that he has to overcome that I think is nearly impossible, which really increases the possibility that Manning is going to get some kind of a harsh sentence and, in fact, get convicted of some of these charges that to an outside observer, to a regular reporter who's been following this process for, about 2 years now, that it looks like there's no evidence for any of these charges, and yet one can also see the judge hedging and deciding that she's going to split the difference and give Manning some kind of a sentence where he wouldn't get out of jail until he was 50 or 60 years old.
Then what you were most surprised by in the prosecution's case against Bradley Manning?
Well, what's been so surprising is that they don't have a lot of evidence. They have mostly circumstantial evidence. They can prove what Manning confessed to, that he willfully communicated this information to persons that were unauthorized to receive it, which in a sense is a violation of the Espionage Act, although I will say that there are other ways to prosecute and go after individuals who violate this act. You don't have to treat them as spies, as our government is doing, and how the Obama administration has gone after a record number of individuals. But there's all of these different instances of passing on information, and they want to say he exceeded authorized access on his computer when he didn't do any hacking. They want to say that he stole the information when he had regular access to the material, and it was fully within his privileges as an intelligence analyst to have the information on his computer. And so that is why, as we're seeing in this court-martial right now, the defense is pushing to get dismissed or to get a finding of not guilty on about half of the charges.